Common Core, the escape from Common Core. Since Ezra Taft Benson was one of the original members of the original version of this breakfast, which was way past the 25 years that we've been going here, I want to start with his words from the official book of his teachings. He said, "There is absolutely nothing in the Constitution which authorized the federal government to enter into the field of education. It is unconstitutional for the federal government to exercise any power over education." If you subscribe to any of the Utah Stop Common Core blogs, there are two of them, and if you've been reading about government, about Common Core in the New American, which is a Dave Jorgensen approved publication, and we have also a video here that Eagle Forum has produced, which we have today. If you've done any of this homework, you know that whatever name it's being called by and whatever the shell game might be, American education is being nationalized by corrupt government and clever businessmen. In 1967, President Benson wrote in a church magazine, and it's quoted in his book here, "From the 5th grade through the 4th year of college, our young people are being indoctrinated with a Marxist philosophy, and I am fearful of the harvest." That harvest is here. It's a full-blown, high-tech, science fiction disaster beyond the wildest dreams of any dictator. It's destroying our children and our best teachers, and it will destroy liberty. Unless the Lord has an escape for us. And if he does, I think it will be to remove all the children we can from the government school system and homeschool them, or send them to private schools. Send them to private schools even if we have to start them in our own home. Escaping is the part of Common Core I want to talk about this morning. But first I want to tell you a Utah story. Wednesday, April 5th, 1876 was a very chilly day in Salt Lake City. Preliminary conference meetings had already begun, and in the foothills above, a couple of boys were out herding cattle. Coming home in the late afternoon, they reached Arsenal Hill, just north of where our Capitol now stands. Guns, ammunition, and powerful explosives, more than 45 tons of them, were stored in 4 brick and stone buildings with metal doors. The doors were pockmarked with bullet holes, and one of the boys had brought his rifle along. Down in the city, some other boys were playing baseball. They heard the rifle shots. Then the explosion knocked some of them unconscious. 500 tons of rock, brick, and debris were blasted down over the city in a 1.5-mile radius, causing major property damage and a lot of injuries, and miraculously just 4 deaths, 2 of them, of course, being the boys. The explosion caused a frightening but not relatively minor incident in the 20th Ward schoolhouse when all the plaster fell off the roof of the building. The teacher, Carl Mazer, went to President Brigham Young's office to report that he could not teach school again until the school was repaired. "That is exactly right," said the prophet. "I have another mission for you, Brother Mazer. We want you to go to Provo to organize an academy in the name of the church, a church school." Brother Mazer had been traumatized now twice in one day. He asked for counsel. President Young paused for a few moments in deep thought and then replied, "Brother Mazer, I want you to remember that you ought not to teach even the alphabet or the multiplication tables without the Spirit of God. That is all. God bless you. Goodbye." The first presidency's secretary said he would never forget the spirit that filled the office that day. I tell you this story because we must remember, A, that adults should not be casual about securing buildings that are deadly attractions, and B, that our Creator wants us and our children to have religious education. 2 weeks later, Mazer was in Provo administering and teaching in the new Brigham Young Academy, but Brigham Young had personally endowed the academy, and when he died the next year, the school struggled severely. Struggling seems to be part of the plan. President Mazer stayed true to the council, and eventually more church schools were built as Brigham had planned. Religious education in the homes and schools and churches of early America is what made our country great, but neither Americans nor the saints have been able to keep it. In the early 1840s, Brigham Young and others living in Nauvoo had gone east on summer missions, so Brigham walked the same streets of Boston as Horace Mann. Was he familiar with Mann's ideas about taxpayer-supported compulsory education? He wouldn't have agreed. Years later, Mann's ideas caught up with the saints in Salt Lake City. When free schools were publicly espoused by an LDS church member, Brigham Young publicly called the man an apostate. But the saints really wanted their free schools. So finally, in the legislative session of 1890, legislators, who are always clever at naming bills, passed the Free School Act. The saints had their free schools, and taxes went up 55% in the first 2 years. Church leaders responded by begging and pleading with the people to stay in the church schools. Yes, it would require sacrifice. The church did all it could to reduce tuition, but tuition was seen as a matter of principle. George Cannon questioned how, after all the persecution the saints had gone through, after their willingness even to die for their religion, how could they now be so careless as to expose their children to ungodliness? And Karl Mazer said, "I would rather have my children exposed to smallpox or cholera than to the ungodly teachings." He understood that the materials in the brick building on Arsenal Hill could only destroy physical bodies, while the ungodly materials in government school buildings could destroy eternal spirits. We should remember that. This sad story of disobedience is told in this book, Jack Monet's Revealed Educational Principles, which he's revised and is very much worth your reading. Church leaders have never stopped warning about the false teachings of Darwin and Dewey and others, some of whom President Benson named by name in his official Book of Teachings, which I'll put up where you can see. No, I won't. Then I can't see. He has also said that we are not using the Book of Mormon as we should. Our families may be corrupted by worldly trends and teachings unless we know how to use the Book of Mormon to expose and combat the falsehoods in socialism, organic evolution, rationalism, humanism, etc. Our nation will continue to degenerate unless we read and heed the words that the God of this land, Jesus Christ, and quit building up and upholding secret combinations. We're doing that. In a recent BYU forum, a Southern Baptist educator, Albert Moeller, pointed out that as we watched the secularization of Europe, we never realized that we were doing the same things here. And Dave will talk about him. In this book, The Great and Abominable Church of the Devil, which most of you probably already have, Vernon Anderson, who was then a BYU professor, used the Book of Mormon to teach us how we have been deceived into upholding the secret combinations. He points out that the students are taught Satan's false theories in their classes, and then they practice those theories day after day in their schools, and then they pass them on to the next generations. How many people have been taught Marxism since 1967? How many of them are now governing us, teaching our teachers and teaching our children? Another book you should read. Interestingly, this was published in 1972 during the 2.5-year presidency, church presidency of Joseph Fielding Smith, who we are studying this year. So you might read that book as a supplement to your Sunday lessons. My plea again is to get the children you love out of the public schools and teach them truth. But how? I'll just give you a quick glimpse of possibilities. I pray that the Holy Ghost will whisper specific information to you during conference today and tomorrow. And then I'll ask Dave to send out links and references from this paper after conference, because I'm waiting to see if what I'm saying here is all going to be rendered false. We have a wonderful pattern for education in the LDS Church, a learning and teaching model that was developed at BYU, Idaho, and introduced to our youth through the Sunday school last year. The implementation is new, but the principles are eternal. They include things like taking personal responsibility and inviting the Holy Ghost to be the teacher. BYU Idaho has a new college program called Pathway. At age 18 or at 30 for older students, the first 2 years of college can be taken through the local institute at a reduced tuition. Students study at home, online, and then they meet with their cohort group once a week. My daughter's in the program. She loves having the gospel taught in every subject. And my hope is that maybe the entry age will someday be lowered so that one or both of the years can be taken during the normal high school years. That's a pattern many homeschoolers are following now with junior colleges. At the other end, I firmly believe that the first 8 years, when the Holy Ghost and the devil are both held back and parents are completely responsible to build the nature and character and faith of their child, no outside schooling is needed. If there's a nurturing mother or grandmother or some good substitute and having an involved father makes it even better. There is certainly no government substitute for the family in those early years, especially not for preschool. Nor is there a need for government schooling after age 8. For the sake of time, we'll skip to the Aaronic priesthood and Elder Callister's conference address from April 2013, a year ago, The Power of the Priesthood in the Boy. I urge you to visit that talk. Elder Callister spoke of a 12-year-old boy who gave a successful 25-minute lesson on the atonement in a Sunday priesthood class. And he showed a chart with a line moving upward from age 12 up to age 18, representing the standard spiritual growth of Aaronic priesthood boys. Then he drew a second line that went from age 12 to 18 at a higher level, the result of the mentoring in leadership method he was teaching, where leaders step back and the young men do more. So I ask, if a 12-year-old boy can give a 25-minute lesson on the atonement on a Sunday, what could that same boy be doing during the rest of the week? If we incorporate leadership principles from the new church models, if we were raising young men with the idea of there being young men rather than teenagers, and if the boy was homeschooled, would Brother Callister then be able to raise his line at age 12 as well as age 18? When the Holy Ghost is involved, and with true curriculum and parental leadership, learning is faster and much more satisfying to the soul. A homeschool youth who is self-reliant in his education could also be involved in tutoring and serving others, teaching the Constitution, developing his own talents, apprenticing in a job, any number of things. And actually, there are patterns of homeschool that homeschoolers have been using for decades in which students attend classroom school just 1 or 2 or 3 days a week. We have choices. If you like your school, you can keep it. But there might be better ways. In that same conference last year, Elder Hales described the distance between the church and the world. The church and the world long ago used to be fairly close together, but now, he said, the world is way, way out there, out of sight. Why then, I wonder, are we still sending our children so far from the holy places to be educated in school buildings that are dangerous attractions and spiritually unsafe? Elder Hales also said, ironically, standing strong sometimes means avoiding and even fleeing from the world. Good advice. If you think fleeing from Common Core would be wise, and if you are willing to develop sufficient faith and courage and do the hard work required, then you can choose homeschool or private school or both. I know that President Benson would approve both choices. He would approve homeschooling because his son Reed would not have written the country's first dissertation on homeschooling, and BYU would not have accepted it, and Reed would not have spoken at so many homeschool conferences, and he and May would not have homeschooled their own children if it wasn't pleasing to his prophet father and to the Lord. I know Elder Verlin Anderson and Shirley Anderson, this man, would approve the choice to homeschool because they helped teach their homeschooled grandchildren, and their daughter, LaDawn Jacob, was one of the pioneers of homeschooling. I know they all would approve the choice of private schooling because they helped build the American Heritage School, a holy place across the street from the Mount Timpanogos Temple, a school fit for the John Adams and Thomas Jeffersons and the Carl Mazers of our day. Years ago, President Benson told the students at the end of their patriotic assembly, "If all children in America had what you have here, I would not fear for the future of our country." We must give our children that. So maybe you are scared. Who isn't these days? Our church leaders have warned us of persecution to come. We must strengthen our faith. And speaking of the fight for freedom, President Benson has said it might cost us blood before we're through. If blood is to be spilt, where would you want to be standing when it happened? Here or way out there? Remember, don't be careless about buildings that are spiritually deadly attractions, and not so much as the alphabet or the times tables without the Spirit of God. Thank you.